Well, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today in our first Fireside chat for the licensing and regulatory community. This is our first chat. Typically, going forward, Mary Alice Olsan, our guest today, will actually be hosting. She'll be in my seat, and she'll be speaking with thought leaders in the licensing and regulatory community. But we thought we'd kick off this first chat by introducing Mary Alice to those of you that don't yet know her. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself and a little bit about what you can expect from this Fireside Chat series going forward. So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us. Everybody will get a recording of this Fireside Chat today. And with that, I'm going to launch a quick video of a conversation that Mary Alice and I had yesterday. That'll last about 12 minutes. And then we're going to cut back and Mary Alice and I will be live and we will be taking live questions from the audience. So with that, here we go. So hi, Mary Alice, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, Malcolm. My name is Mary Alice Olsan. I'm the VP of Licensing Strategy for Certemy, and I'm also a former regulator at both the state and national level.
Tell us more about your experience at the state level. Where did you work and what were your roles?
Sure. So I served as the Executive Director of the Louisiana Licensed Professional Counselors Board of Examiners, and I also worked as a special advisor for the North Carolina Board of Counseling as well.
So what was it like being Executive Director of the Louisiana Board, and how big was the board? How many licensees? Just give us a flavor.
Sure. So being the Executive Director of the Louisiana LPC Board was an incredible experience. Really small board, small staff. Actually, when I first started, within 2 weeks, I was the only staff. So that was particularly challenging. We have had about 12 to 1,400 applicants per year, regulated a total of 5,000 licensees, and there are about 8,000 or 9,000 licensees now. And also important to note, the Louisiana LPC Board, we actually regulated counselors and marriage and family therapists, so we were a composite board. We had managed disciplinary cases, anywhere from 60 to 100 at any given time that I was juggling, along with an incredible staff and board members who helped. And we also had a robust professional assistance program as well for licensees who were struggling with addiction or possibly some mental health challenges.
So tell us why you were brought in as a special counselor for the NC Counseling Board.
Sure. So when I first got started with the Louisiana LPC Board, just to back up a little bit, we were in a really tough position financially and had a lot of sort of operational challenges. And so I was able to work with, again, an incredible board and staff to turn that around. And so I had a contact in North Carolina. They told me the North Carolina board was sort of experiencing some similar challenges. They needed to streamline some operations and, frankly, kind of develop a better relationship with the licensees in their state as well. And so I was brought in to work with them as a special advisor and, simplify the renewal process, help with some communication to their licensees, and just overall really help the staff figure out where their needs, or rather strengths, need to be focused.
Great. Very interesting. So tell us more about your experience at the national level.
Sure. So while I was the Executive Director of the Louisiana LPC Board, I actually served almost that entire time in various board positions for AACB, which is the American Association of State Counseling Boards. So they're the National Regulatory Association for all state licensing boards that regulate counselors in the United States. That was an incredible experience. I actually had the opportunity to later be their executive director when I was working for the National Board for Certified Counselors as well. So that was exciting. For NBCC, the National Board for Certified Counselors, I worked with them as their director of strategy initially, and then later their director of government and legislative affairs department. So what was especially cool about that last position with them was the ability to actually sort of be uncuffed, so to speak, in terms of advocacy efforts for counselors. So as a regulator in most states, not all states, you really can't lobby. You can only provide information. You have to be really delicate in terms of the information you provide to legislators. So it was great to finally be in a position where I get to go to Capitol Hill and actually talk about all the things that counselors can do and lobby in a really direct way. So that was a lot of fun.
Now, didn't you also work with the Association of Marital and Family Therapy?
Yes, so I got the opportunity to work with AMFTRB, which is the National Regulatory Association for Marriage and Family Therapy Boards, for a number of years. Fantastic group of people. One really cool thing that I got to do was be the chair of the teletherapy committee. So along with several other great people, we actually developed a draft set of policies for boards, state licensing boards managing marriage and family therapists that actually use to help individuals learn, how to use teletherapy effectively and safely. And eventually we turned those policies into a set of regulations that boards could actually copy and paste directly into their rules, or in some cases statute, depending on the nature of the board. So that was an incredibly rewarding experience. Really glad I had that opportunity.
So what are some of the biggest problems and opportunities facing both state and national regulators today?
So at the state level, it's actually funny. I just talked to an individual who's brand new as an executive director in a state. And he had the exact same experience, literally almost the exact same experience that I had, 10 years ago when I first walked into the Louisiana LPC board office. Tons of manual processes, paper, filing cabinets, really no technology that can help you in any kind of meaningful way. So unfortunately, I think that state licensing boards are still dealing with those challenges, especially smaller boards. A lot of repetitive questions from callers and applicants, because it's just really hard to get that information in any other way besides calling the board office. So I think those are definitely struggles that boards still have today.
And how about opportunities for the state boards?
Thank you for the reminder. So as far as opportunities, I think creating a lot of transparency with their applicants and licensees. So boards can kind of seem like a black box of information sometimes. And frankly, that's true, right? It's a fair charge in some situations. So it's a challenge, but also an incredible opportunity for boards to really connect with their boards and connect with their licensees and applicants and create a high level of transparency, which translates into trust between both groups.
And how about the national bodies? What kind of problems and opportunities do you see for them today?
Yeah, so working with AACB and AMFTRB, and also having the opportunity to work with other national regulatory associations through my work with Certemy, one sort of common theme that I've seen is just the challenges in getting information from their member boards. So their member boards being those state licensing boards that they represent, because of course they're the national regulatory body. So it could be something as basic as staying on top of who the executive director is, just keeping current contact information. And so if you think about that, it's even harder to imagine an easy exchange of information about applicants or disciplinary sanctions. And I think that exchange of information is incredibly important, because individual boards really want some help from their national regulatory associations to make sure that they're engaging in regulatory best practices and they're following trends, and they have a good sense of awareness of what other boards are doing in other states. For example, every single state licensing board is going to receive unlicensed practice complaints or dual relationship type complaints. How are other state boards handling those issues? What types of disciplinary sanctions are they handing down? Great opportunities for national regulatory associations to be able to dig into data like that and give that information back to regulatory boards if there is an easy exchange of information, because of course the National Regulatory Association has to be able to get information about what each state board is doing.
Very interesting. So you've switched roles. Tell us why you've moved from the regulatory world and joined Certemy, a software vendor.
Yeah, it is a strange transition at first glance, right? So I actually began my career working in technology, working for a small custom software development firm. And then, like I said, jumped into regulation, completely fell in love, recognized that's very geeky. None of my friends and family want to talk about what it is that I do for a living. But I think it's incredibly interesting. And so Certemy, it's the best of both worlds. It gives me an opportunity to stay steeped in regulation and be an active member of the regulatory community. But instead of just, talking about the challenges in the regulatory community, actually being the person that can also bring solutions as well. So for me, it's the way to pay it forward, because a lot of people helped me out when I was a first regulator and throughout my entire experience as a regulator.
All right. Well, so now tell us a little bit more about this Fireside Chat series and what we can expect over the next few months.
Really excited about it. Basically, it's another free resource for the regulatory community to find out, what's happening, hear from thought leaders, hear from experts in the field. And what I'm going to try to do is showcase topics that are important across professions. We all have to deal with disciplinary complaints. We all have to deal with licensure portability challenges. And as far as the format, it's going to be much like this, except I'll be in your seat, Malcolm. Very scary. You're doing a great job, by the way. So like 30-minute segments with Q&A at the end, so that everybody has an opportunity to delve into the issues a little bit deeper.
Great. Well, let me just read off some of the topics that I believe you'll be covering, and no need to talk about all of them, but maybe pick a couple and just expand a little for us. So I know that you'll be talking about leveraging data and IT in the regulatory community, license portability models, including compacts, deregulation efforts when legislators become regulators, managing internal applicants, lessons learned at regulatory events such as FARB and CLEAR, the purpose of exams in regulation and exam management in general, and international regulatory perspectives. Can you maybe take a couple of those and just expand a little and let us know what we might expect?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, choosing those topics that are going to be most applicable across profession types. So one thing I think that every regulatory entity out there is still struggling with is dealing with and managing international applicants in a way that makes sense. And first off, it's just about, how do you even learn more about sort of the academic institutions and the exam process in other countries? And what's the fairest way to assess international applicants? So I'll be bringing in some friends that have great expertise in that can help boards kind of, come up with an outline for how they might want to approach that issue as well. Licensure portability continues to be a huge challenge. So talking about the efficacy of compacts, obviously not the only portability model out there, but one that's really gaining a lot of traction. The legislative session always gives us lots to work with in terms of talking about things happening in regulation. So I think the idea of legislators becoming regulators is a really interesting one. So talking to specific individuals who have had to implement, laws and rules that maybe they had absolutely no input on whatsoever, but they then, in the regulatory space had to figure out administratively how to handle those challenges and sort of what tools that they use to be successful in that.
Okay, and where else might folks see you above and beyond the firesides here?
So I just got back from the Clear Winter Symposium, which was great. It was all about IT. I'm actually going to have a fireside chat just about that symposium a little bit later. And then I'll be going to FARB actually later this week, which is going to be great. So exciting to be part of both of those organizations and part of both of those events.
Great. Well, I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much, Mary Alice. I'm delighted to be handing the reins over to you for the next chat. It sounds like we've got a lot of fun topics to cover, and I'll certainly be tuning in and looking forward to learning more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malcolm. I enjoyed it.
Folks, well, don't leave just yet. That was a little pre-recorded chat that Mary Alice and I had yesterday. For continuity, I kept the same shirt on. Don't normally do that, I can assure you. So in this next portion, we just want to take some questions from the audience. So we're just inviting questions from those of you that are listening. Again, thank you for listening. If you've got some questions, if you could just go ahead and submit those and I will read them out and Mary Alice will answer them. So let's see here. All right, so we've got a few here, Mary Alice. Are you ready?
Oh, goodness, the pressure. Yes, I'm ready. I'll do my best.
Okay, so the first one. What is a trend in regulation that you think is most concerning?
Good question. So, obviously deregulation is something that we've been dealing with for a while in the regulatory community, efforts by legislators and other specific special interest groups. And I think it continues to be a challenge. And look, sometimes the side effects of that kind of, process mean that boards are having to be more transparent in their application processes and maybe take a look at their rules and regulations and think about, okay, where can we cut back or where can we make things clearer? I think that's great. Introducing more transparency is a great thing. But what I worry about is when you see reports like I saw last week of boards sort of being attacked with this kind of malicious undertone, like as if they're not there to protect the public. That's not their first and foremost goal. And that there's something in it for boards to kind of restrict the ability of individuals to practice. So I think we just have to be really careful with the rhetoric. Are there ways that boards can improve and streamline and become more efficient and make things easier for their applicants and licensees? Absolutely. But bottom line, boards exist for a reason, regulation exists for a reason, and that's to protect people. And if that pendulum swings too far, I think what will end up happening, sadly, is people will get hurt because regulation exists to protect the public.
Yeah, and I must say, in the time that we've spent together, I've learned many things, but one thing in particular is the primary role of all of these regulatory bodies is to protect the public. So there's a follow-up question to that, and that is there a trend in regulation that you think is particularly exciting?
Okay, good. A more positive question. So actually, what I'm kind of reading about in publications regarding regulation and seeing at conferences and events is the concept of cultural competency in kind of two ways. So one, boards looking at becoming more culturally competent in terms of how they review their applicants from diverse backgrounds, and then likewise helping their licensees to ensure that, the services that they provide are reflective of the diverse population that they serve.
Great. Let's see. What else do we have here? This question asks, what do you recommend to help executive directors stay on top of legislation that could affect boards?
That is tricky, right? The legislative session starts and then you've got 100, 200, 300, 1,000 bills that you're trying to dig through. So, like I mentioned actually on the video before, not all regulators have the ability to lobby, but you need to stay on top of what's happening in terms of legislation. I've definitely been in a position when I was with the Louisiana LPC board where I literally just got a new law in the mail that said, not only do you have to write regulations for this, which costs boards money to actually promulgate new rules, but here's the deadline to get it all done. And a board may or may not have actually budgeted for sort of unexpected expenses when it comes to rules promulgation. So staying on top of it's really important. Some of the things that I did were, set up Google alerts, do keyword searches on my state legislator website, obviously stay in contact with my friends in the field. We kind of all share information. And another great resource are the professional organizations of the profession that you regulate in your state. So if it's a larger organization, they can afford a lobbyist. Lobbyists actually have tools where they can automate the process of tracking specific terms that might be important to the profession or to the regulatory space, like occupational licensing or regulation or scope of practice. And so staying in touch with them so they can give you a heads up too is really helpful.
All right, thank you. Let's see, I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. So this question asks, how can boards do a better job of maintaining consistency in decision-making, especially since board members can change over time?
It's a really good point. So, in each state and really with each board term lengths can be really different from 2 years to 4 years, or if boards can serve more than one term, you might have a board member that's on a board for 10. I've heard as long as 15 years, actually. But the reality is that most boards change pretty regularly. And so what's consistent are the board staff, especially the executive director. And so, what's important is keeping track of the decisions that the boards are making. So if a board interprets a rule differently, which, look, we try so hard when we write regulations to make it just incredibly black and white, not leave any room for interpretation, because that introduces subjectivity into the application process, for example. But if there is a rule, for example, that has some wiggle room, if you will, and a board decides to interpret it in a dramatically different fashion than maybe they have previously, it's going to be up to the board staff, primarily the executive director, to keep track of those changes, decisions. And I would really recommend, being transparent with the public, licensees, future applicants about it. If it's something pretty significant, issue a new policy statement or, guideline statement that you put on your board website, just making it really clear that this is how we're interpreting this piece of regulation.
Yeah, it definitely seems like one of the roles that technology can play is improving transparency, both into the activity of the board, but also making sure that the licensees always understand exactly what's going on and where they are in the renewal or the application process. Let's see, I think we still have a couple of minutes. This one asks, what's the biggest lesson that you learned with the Louisiana board?
Oh, wow. So, gosh, what a great experience that was. That's really, I cut my teeth in regulation, if you will. So I learned a ton. I think one of the big takeaways was always thinking about the applicant and sort of any sort of new process or idea that the board has in terms of outreach. So as regulators, and I'm absolutely guilty of this, applicants and licensees who are renewing their applications rather, they can be bad about not reading applications, right? And so they're calling, asking the same questions over and over again, and you're thinking, gosh, if you would just read the application, this would be so much easier for you, it'd be so much easier for me, right? And I do think boards do whatever they can to make it as easy as the process as possible for their applicants. But one thing to remember is that if you kind of meet your applicants, your licensees where they are, especially in terms of technology, right, and make it easier for them, it's going to be easier for you as a regulator. So not to the point of babysitting them, right? Like they're all adult professionals that don't want to be babysitted. But, giving them opportunities, like, for example, when they take continuing education course, snapping a shot of that certificate with their cell phone and being able to upload it to a profile. So when it's time for renewal, it's right there. That's easier for, the licensee who's renewing. It's a lot easier for board staff too, because then they're not answering all these questions and sort of getting all this feedback from the licensees, and they can just focus on processing information. So I think that's a big part of it. Is obviously your first mission is to protect the public, and you should always do everything from that lens. But it's great to take a moment and think, all right, how is this going to work for applicants and licensees, and is there a way that we can make this a more user-friendly process?
Yeah, and presumably it's a win for the board staff too, right? If you make life easier for the licensees and you can anticipate and proactively answer questions, then they're not calling in and asking those same questions. So let's see, one question just came in. Let's make sure we answer everybody's question. All right, this is a very long question. I'm going to read all of it. So, so it basically says, I'm the chair of the Indiana Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board. We're a composite board overseeing 4 different licenses: mental health counselors, social workers, and MFT and addiction counselors. The Indiana state legislature passed a bill in 2018 to open up reciprocity, a word that I can never say. Part of that is good, of course, but it also means applicants from states that accept less criteria than Indiana graduates will be equal to our grads who may have more academic hours and more pre and post degree experience hours. So I'm not quite sure what the question is. That almost sounds like a statement, but you got any thoughts on how to handle that situation, Mary Alice? Basically, I think it's composite board, and the requirements in some states are not as stringent as the requirements in the home state, primary state.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get where you're going with it, and it is a concern. So I'll kind of answer that question in 2 ways. So one thing that I didn't actually mention is that I'm serving on the Counseling Compact Advisory Group for counselors to figure out if compacts are going to be a reasonable route to create true licensure portability for counselors. And one thing that I've really learned that's kind of changed my mindset in terms of how you analyze individuals coming in from out of state versus the requirements you put on individuals in state is always remembering bare minimum requirements for safe practice, right? So as regulators, we're not asking our licensees to engage in best practices, although that's a wonderful thing, right? But and we want them to do that. But in terms of actually reviewing the applicants, we're saying, all right, is this person qualified bare minimum for safe practice? And so when you think of it in terms of that, and you start thinking of licensure portability in terms of initial requirements for a licensure, rather than thinking about it in terms of, okay, if this person has X amount of experience, they should be able to do X, Y, Z, then it becomes a little bit more comfortable to let in people from out of state who may not meet the requirements of individuals in state. But when you look at it from initial qualifications to practice in both states, for example, you're not too far off. But it is challenging. I think that for true licensure portability to exist in any profession, there is going to be that moment, that kind of gut check where you just say, okay, what am I willing to allow in so that I have more people out here serving the public, because of course that's what it's all about, access to care as well as public protection, and just making sure that you kind of draw the line in the sand on the issues that are really, really important to you, that you feel like are a requirement for bare minimum practice safely.
All right.
Hope that helps.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, whoever asked the question, please feel free to follow up with Mary Alice. Email is Molsan, right? MOLSAN at Certemy.com. I'm sure Mary Alice would love to continue that conversation with you. We've got 2 minutes left. One last question, and it's going to have to be a quick answer, Mary Alice, so that we can wrap up and be respectful of everyone's time here. But the question is, do you think technology is the solution to most of a board's challenges?
Well, obviously I'm biased, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is it certainly helps with almost every single problem that you've got, right? It's not going to help you when you've got a legislator emailing you at 10:30 at night and giving you a hard time about an applicant that you didn't approve necessarily, right? But it will help you with all of your kind of day-to-day headaches and administrative issues. I do think technology is an incredible tool. Ultimately what you want to do is just use technology to get rid of all of the tasks that you don't love, right? And all the follow-up types of issues that you can, as a regulator, really focus on the human factor. So focus on your interaction with students who want to be part of your profession, and applicants and licensees, and connecting with them on a personal level.
Great. Well, thank you, Mary Alice. And Kimball got back to us, and she says, you responded exactly as she had hoped. So thank you for that. And
oh, good. Okay.
I read your email address. So again, it's M for Mary Alice Olsan, OLSAN at Certemy.com. And so I know that Mary Alice would love to hear from us. She will be hosting these going forward. She'll be bringing folks on, talking about interesting topics. I know she wants to hear from you about the topics you think that she should be covering. If you happen to be attending FARB, she's going to be there. Swing by and say hello. Any thoughts from you, Mary Alice, before we wrap it up?
No, thanks, Malcolm. I think you summed it up well. Would love to speak with any of you. And again, just to reiterate what Malcolm said, it would be great to get your thoughts on other ideas that you'd like to see featured here. And yes, please come visit me at FARB. I'll be attending, but we'll also have a table as well.
All right. Well, again, everybody, thank you so much for attending. I know everybody's time is precious. Hopefully this was a valuable use of your time. Apologies, some of the technical difficulties. This is the first of many, so hopefully we'll iron out some of those wrinkles quite quickly. But again, thank you very much. The content, I think, was great. Great to get your perspective on all of these questions, as always, Mary Alice. And I, for one, look forward to the next edition. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Malcolm. No problem.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.